Hi, my name is Sharon Shagnon, and I am the Director of the Sandusky County Board of Elections. Thank you for signing up to be a precinct election official / poll worker. With our country being in the middle of a pandemic and possibly the biggest election many of us will ever see, your service is of the utmost importance right now. This election is very challenging to say the least, so please understand that this is uncharted territory for everyone, and the Board of Election staff is working hard to ensure that we have a safe, lawful election and that every valid vote is counted. We depend on folks like you to help us accomplish that. If you have received a letter that asks you to be a substitute worker, you may still be assigned to a precinct on or before Election Day. We are still trying to iron out these locations where additional office officials may be needed. If you aren't assigned for this election, please don't be discouraged and make sure you sign up again. Quality precinct election officials are needed in every election. Please note that we have not received the quick reference guide from the Secretary of State, so those will be provided in your bags on Election Day. If you are doing the online training, a copy of the training manual is available on our website at sanduskycountyoh.gov. It is the same page that you visited to click on the video. If you are taking the class in person, everyone has been provided a copy of the manual. We're going to be using this manual to go through. If you'd like to follow along or make notes, feel free to do so. Now we're going to cover some of the responsibilities that are required when you serve as a precinct election official. Election officials are the front line for conducting elections. It cannot be done without you. We need to conduct a fair and impartial election, assist voters, work as a team, ensure that every voter is given an opportunity to vote, ensure that all forms, ballots, and voting machines remain available, safe, and free from tampering. We also will have to deal with some difficult or special situations as the needs arise. We currently have a total of 232 election officials and voting location managers, plus substitute workers, 58 precincts, 58 voting location managers, and 21 polling locations countywide, along with 21 administrators who look over the ballot scanner. You may want to take a few minutes the day before the election to review the materials that we cover during the training. It could be very beneficial to you come Election Day. Don't be overwhelmed during this training. We do cover a lot of material in a short period of time, but remember there are no locations that don't have at least one veteran election official who knows what to do and that's worked in the past. Plus, we're only just a phone call away. So try to enjoy yourself while you learn all about voting. The first section we're going to get into is Section B in the manual. It's the location layout due to COVID. Locations are going to be laid out a little bit differently for this election due to the pandemic. The following plans are going to require that everybody works together and that we rotate the jobs throughout the day. It's not fair for one person to do one job all day, and it's beneficial for everyone to have an understanding of all of the positions and responsibilities. If you feel like you won't be able to participate in all these tasks, you will need to work with your team members on Election Day to make that happen so that you can decide which jobs you can and cannot do, or just choose not to serve this time. It's important that we follow all of these guidelines. Our office is not going to be able to handle a lot of calls about officials not getting along or having disagreements about the duties. Please work together so that Election Day can be easier for everyone who is working and for the voters of Sandusky County. I'm going to put out a couple of examples of how the precincts are going to be laid out this time. Like I said, they're a little bit different than in years past. A couple of the examples are in a single precinct location. We are going to have 2 bipartisan team members doing the books. That means we're going to have one person who's going to take care of the clerk's book and one person who's going to take care of the blue book. That doesn't seem so different from years gone by. However, the person doing the clerk's book is also going to provide the ballots and give the voting instructions to the voters. We will have one person at the door with a green book to check to be sure that the voters are sent to the correct area of the precinct so that we can move people in and out as quickly as possible. So they're going to determine whether that voter is going to be a regular voter or a provisional voter and send them to the correct table and monitor the number of voters in the building at one time. We will have one provisional table where they will process the provisional voters as always. One person who is sanitizing tables and keeping pens clean, and one floater. This might be an administrator, someone from the provisional table, or additional PEOs, as I will refer to them here forward, for precinct election officials. Those folks are just going to kind of float around and help out where needed. One more example would be a 3 precinct location. We'll go with that one and skip 2 precinct. It's all in the manual, so you guys will all have your guidelines with you on election day. For a 3 precinct location, again, we're going to have the 2 bipartisan team members, one doing the blue book, checking the IDs, and one who's going to do the red book, give instructions for the ballots, and pass the ballots out. We may have 1 to 2 people at the door who will monitor who's coming in and who's coming out. 1 green book station as folks come through the door. A lot of precincts will have multiple entrances and exits. So we're working to try to figure out a flow for that pattern at this point. But instructions will be provided for election day. There will be 1 to 2 people working at the provisional table. Again, they'll be processing all the provisional voters. 2 folks who will be going around and wiping down the tables and keeping the pens clean after voters have voted. And 1 floater who can assist wherever they're going to be needed. The manual will go on up to, we have a 5 precinct location in the county. So depending on where you're voting or where you're working, you will want to go through this manual and make sure that you guys have things set up. And as I mentioned before, additional instructions will be provided. Section C of the manual is the PPE/COVID information for precinct election officials. We have a whole host of things that are going to be different due to the pandemic, and we need to follow these rules in order to keep everyone safe. Precinct election officials must take their temperature at home before leaving on election day. If you're experiencing any symptoms, have had contact with someone with COVID, or if you're running a fever, please stay home. Let the board office know as soon as possible that you won't be able to work so that we can get your position filled as quickly as possible. Masks will be mandatory and they will be provided. If you wish to bring your own, you may do so. If you're medically unable to wear a mask, a clear shield will be required. However, a mask and a shield would be ideal for everyone. We do hope that most people will wear a mask, but at the very least, a shield is required. We will be providing a limited amount of face shields to each precinct to be used should it be needed for speaking with maybe a hearing impaired voter, or being in contact with someone who claims to be COVID positive, or someone who is exhibiting COVID symptoms. Voters who appear without a mask. This is going to be a potential issue that many of you are going to face. We must ask those voters who enter without a mask to use the curbside voting that we will have available and remain in their vehicle. We will cover this process in more detail later. If the voter still insists on casting an in-person ballot without a mask, we must permit them to vote. Please remain professional when dealing with those voters. Social distancing of at least 6 feet from others, voters, and fellow precinct election officials must be practiced throughout the day. Tables will be doubled up in order to create more of a distance from voters who are approaching the table where the books are and where the ballots are given. In addition to the provided masks and gloves, each precinct will be provided with 1 kit that's going to include a mask, a face shield, gloves, and a gown. This kit should only be used in the event of having contact with a voter exhibiting symptoms. Having contact with a voter who claims to be positive for COVID, or in communicating with someone with a hearing disability. This year, unfortunately, communal eating will be prohibited, such as sharing pizza or the notorious election day potlucks. Unfortunately, we can't do that this year with COVID. So if you have anything that you want to bring with you, please pack your food items and bring them with you for the day. Everyone also gets a 1 hour break, and the voting location managers will assign that at some point during the day for you to be able to leave, and you can go home and eat or just take a break and get out of there for a little bit. On election night, voting location managers will be required to return the ballots and materials to the board office along with a member of the opposite party. Voting location managers and precinct election officials who do ride back together to the board office must socially distance as much as possible in the vehicle. If one person is driving, the passenger may want to be in the back seat on the passenger side. And if it's cooler, if it's warm enough, you may want to roll down the windows a little bit for some more air in the vehicle. Face masks must be worn at all times during the transportation. Hand sanitizer and or hand washing must be done between every voter and frequently throughout the day. Hand washing is recommended for at least 20 seconds. Please be sure that your hands are completely dry after using sanitizer and or washing them prior to handling any of the election materials. Gloves will be provided as well, but please remember that gloves are going to do you no good if you keep the same pair on and touch multiple surfaces throughout the day and then touch your face. We will have disinfectant wipes located throughout the location, and each surface that has had recent contact must be wiped down. There will be one person who will be in charge of wiping the surfaces down between the voters, and this is to include the express vote when used. I believe that the administrators may be the ones to wipe down the actual scanner, but the express vote, if it gets used, it's going to need to be wiped down between voters. However, don't let the voters do it themselves, and we will cover that in a little bit more detail later. We will also have someone who is wiping the pens. We're going to have a bucket for clean pens and a bucket for dirty pens. So when a voter comes in, they're going to be given a clean pen. When they're done, they'll be instructed where to put the pen at the end so that it can be sanitized and ready for the next voter. When precinct election officials change jobs, let's say you were working in the signature poll book, but then you go to the provisional table, please take the time to wipe that stuff down with a wipe before handing it off to the next person. Again, one worker will be stationed at the front door to control the number of people who are coming through the doors at one time. And voters who require curbside voting will need to sign this blue book. Please wipe the book and the pens down between the curbside voters as well. We talked a little bit about sanitizing the equipment. We will provide the alcohol wipes, and those are the only things that are to be used on the equipment. You cannot use sanitizers or regular disinfectant wipes on the equipment because it will ruin it. Please don't allow voters to wipe them down themselves. As mentioned, the administrator, we're going to have taking care of the scanner where folks are going to put their ballot in on the way out. And for the express vote, the precinct election officials will need to wipe that down in between voters. We need to keep everything as sanitized as possible. Excuse me. We talked a little bit about the voters who refuse to wear a mask. Again, if you do have that situation, calmly remind them that they are being asked to wear the mask for the safety and the health of other voters and precinct election officials. Offer them to vote from their car. That's one way to keep more people out of the polling location where they won't be in contact, but they still get to vote. And it's important that everyone gets to vote, and we cannot refuse that to anyone, regardless if they come in with a mask or not. Election official pay in section F. Be sure on election night that you sign your attendance roster before the end of the night. Voting location managers receive $130 for the day. That is $120 of regular precinct election official pay, plus $10 to pick up their supplies, as well as mileage. Precinct election officials that aren't voting location managers will receive $120, and everyone who attends the training gets $15. Please be sure to follow the instructions in the video in order to be paid for attending this online training. If you're a precinct election official and you're asked to ride back to the office on election night with the voting location manager, you will receive an extra $5. Please allow up to 3 weeks after the election to receive your pay. Section G is voting location managers. The voting location managers are chosen by the last gubernatorial election. Those folks must pick up the supplies the day before and return them on election night. They assign jobs for the day as well as breaks and rotating the position. Section H is precinct election officials and voting location managers. Work as a team to get everything set up in the morning and to tear down at night. Work closely with other members to process the voters. Assist voters in a courteous and respectful manner. Verify and sign all the forms as necessary. Take the oath and make sure you sign the oath page that is provided in the books. And again, the attendance roster, make sure you get that signed so that we can get you paid. Ensure the security of the ballots, supplies, and other materials, and record important information as necessary. You will need to post a 4-part list that will be provided in your bag. We will go through all of your supplies that you will be receiving, but the 4-part list must be posted at 6:30 a.m., 11 a.m., and 4 p.m. You'll have one list that's left over at the end of the night. That can be thrown in the garbage or left on the door at the polling location. We don't need to have those back. Checking voter IDs. Supervising the use of the signature poll book. If anyone witnesses a poll worker allowing a voter to sign the book without checking identification, we need to know about that immediately. Conduct the election properly and lawfully. Election official conduct. Everyone must arrive to the polling location by 6 a.m. Let us know as soon as you can if you are unable to work so that we can get a replacement. Treat voters and fellow workers with dignity and respect. Do not distract voters from their business at the polls. If there's a lot of conversation going on at your table when a voter approaches, the conversations should stop so that you can focus on what you're doing and take care of the voter properly. Remember, the voter always comes first. You're going to need to remain calm, even in the situations where you really don't want to. Sometimes we run across angry or disgruntled voters, and how we handle those personally is how the rest of the situation and the rest of the interaction is going to go. So remain calm and professional when you deal with folks that have some issues or problems that they want to vent about. Your behavior is going to set the tone for the whole polling place. Please treat people, voters, and fellow election officials the way that you expect to be treated. Be welcoming to the new election officials. Section J is unacceptable conduct. Under no circumstances may an election official talk politics in the polling location. Big no-no, especially this year. No campaigning or attempting to influence voters or other election officials. You may not wear or distribute campaign literature or paraphernalia. You cannot refuse to enforce election laws, including in refusing, again, to check IDs, even for folks you know. Refuse to allow a voter access to a ballot, whether it's a regular ballot or a provisional voter ballot. No voter is ever told that they cannot vote. No gossiping. Gossiping about a voter, fellow election official, etc. will not be tolerated. Food or drinks on or near the table where the books and ballots are located is a big no-no. We understand that people have drinks and have food with them throughout the day. Just please keep it away from your materials. If a drink or coffee spills onto ballots, that's going to be a big issue, and we don't want that to happen. Use of electronic devices during election day at the polling location is strictly prohibited. The only person using their electronic device or cell phone should be the voting location manager in order to keep in contact with the Board of Elections office. The other person who may have a phone and use it is the provisional judge. They need to call in to check to see where voters need to be to vote. We don't want to send voters to another location or a precinct without first calling to make sure that they're in the right place. You have to verify voters' precincts. This will be covered a little bit more under the provisional section when we get to that, but it's just not fair to voters whose ballots can't be counted because the workers didn't take the right steps to get the voters in the correct polling location. Section K, we're going to go over the safety a little bit for the polling locations. If you see something, say something. Don't let a situation get out of hand before you call for help. Be alert at all times. Any signs of a weapon should dictate an immediate call for assistance, not a panic call or necessarily a 911 call. Remember, Ohio is an open carry state. However, there are restrictions for most places of worship, government buildings, schools, and establishments that have liquor permits. A quiet phone call to law enforcement should suffice. Try not to escalate the situation. Strange behavior should dictate further investigating or a call for assistance. Engage the individual in conversation. If you see somebody that's acting a little off from the rest of the people coming in, maybe you can approach them and ask them, are you here to vote today? Is there some way that we can help you? Be aware of or alert of abandoned packages, book bags, etc. Be observant and keep your eyes open for anything that seems unusual. Suspicious people who don't vote and just kind of wander around the polling location. People who ask unusual questions or show an unusual interest in our processes. Vehicles that might appear out of place or suspicious that can't be accounted for. People taking pictures of the polling place other than members of the media. People who are reluctant to identify themselves or who are obviously avoiding officials. Confrontational individuals. Do not get into an argument with folks. It's not worth it. It's going to bring more attention to the matter, and it's going to just make the situation worse. If an individual does refuse to leave because of their attire, their demeanor, comments, call one of the numbers below for assistance and let law enforcement handle it. I know that over the years we've had a lot of conversations about people wearing political attire into the polling location. Sometimes when somebody has a little button on or hat, it's better just to ignore it and let the voter get in, do their business, and move along. A lot of folks would do these things just to try to get folks riled up in the location. And sometimes I think the more attention we pay to that, the more of a ruckus it's going to cause and a disruption in the polling location. That's the last thing that we want to do. Be prepared for an emergency plan with a backup or an exit plan. If something goes wrong inside of your location, what are you guys going to do to get your books and ballots and all of your supplies together? and where are the exits that are closest to you. Remain calm if something happens. Your actions are going to dictate that of those around you. If you start to panic, everybody else is going to panic, and it's going to make the whole situation worse. So try to remain calm. Evacuation of your polling location. If you have to leave your polling location due to an emergency, a fire, a tornado, bomb threat, whatever the situation might be, don't panic. Your safety, the safety of your coworkers is first and foremost to us. If you can't get all the materials out, so be it. Human life is definitely our number one priority. Gather what you can. You'll want to make sure, if you do have time to get a few things, get your signature poll book out of there and your express vote cards. Those are two of the things that I think would be most, would be the top priorities to remove if you have to evacuate the location. Go to a safe place and call 911 if needed. More than one voting location manager or precinct election official don't need to call. One person needs to call. We can't overwhelm the 911 system should we have an event. Once everyone is safe, call the board office and let us know what occurred. Section M is security procedures. The Ohio Secretary of State is implementing additional security measures for the upcoming presidential election, and Sandusky County is following these policies. Counties throughout Ohio have been upgrading computer systems, locking down sensitive equipment, training in cybersecurity, as well as physical security measures in their offices and at the voting locations. The standards that are being set are not optional. Everything is mandatory, and we have to follow the procedures. This will help to secure our democratic process. You must follow all the election laws of the state of Ohio. Be sure to use all of your locks. We'll go through the locks situation when we go through the supplies here in a little bit. Maintain control of everything that you have, the books, the ballots. Everything needs to be accounted for at all times. So don't unload your vehicle and leave things sitting in a parking lot while you go back and forth to get more of the supplies. Keep everything together and have eyes on it. Keep your records updated at all times throughout the day. Document any incidents that might occur, such as a voter signing the book but not putting their ballot through the machine, any delays that you have, or anything else that you think could have an impact on the election. It's important that you write that down on the problems and issue sheet that you will be provided. Double check all of your materials to ensure that you have the correct supplies and your ballots for your proper location. Last but not least, please take your time. Don't try to rush a voter. Don't try to rush the process. Take your time and think about things that you're doing before you do it, so that we can all be successful. I did put a section here under section N in case of an emergency. I'm not going to go through all those numbers. Just know that they will be available on election day in your bags if you need to contact somebody. This is going to conclude part 1 of a 2-part video. Welcome back. We're going to move on now with part 2 of the precinct election official training. In section O in the manual is prior to election day. These are some tips for especially those of you who haven't worked in the past. The day before or at some point before the election, you're going to want to familiarize yourself with the polling location. How long is it going to take you to get there? Where will you park when you get there? And where the entrances are. Early on election morning, as you know, at that hour before 6 a.m., it's dark and it may be a strange place to you. So it's best to try to figure that stuff out before election day. Review your training materials again before election day. You can also take them with you to have available to refer to throughout the day. If you're a voting location manager, you will need to write down all the absentees in your signature poll book the night before that come through from the time that we have printed the books. We're going to have more in-person voters and more by mail ballots. They all need to have the absentee written across the line so that other people know that they've voted and that they will need to vote a provisional ballot if they've already been issued an absentee ballot. This is optional. It's not optional, it's a mandatory step that we have to take. If on election day your precinct starts to run low on ballots, call us immediately so that we can get some more out to you. If you're a precinct that has a school split, you need to let us know that too so that we get the proper ballots. Section Q, setting up the precinct. On election day, you're going to have a number of supplies that the voting location manager has picked up. Along with those supplies will be your blue ballot box here. You will have some signage to put outside 100 feet from the door of the polling location. You'll have some flags. These will be set up, one big one out near the road, the two smaller ones at the 100-foot entrance. You'll have a red clerk's book in the bag, the blue signature poll book in the bag, and if the state provides them again, the quick reference guides. This is the bag that all the materials will come in. Every precinct has their own bag and they're all labeled. Just as the boxes are labeled, doesn't look quite like that, but everything is labeled so that you're ensured that you have the correct materials for your location. Also within the bag will be a folder, looks something like this. It's going to have a bunch of different signage in it that's going to need to be posted. A precinct sign so that your table can be marked within a location and easier to find. You'll be given a set of locks. We'll do a little bit with those here in a few minutes. We have a supply bag that's got your pens. There's a few stickers in this one. You'll have obviously more stickers. Name tags will be in here, some scrap paper, rubber bands, things of that nature if you need it. Spoiled or defaced envelopes. We'll have a pack of those within each bag. This is the 4-part list we briefly discussed, as well as a provisional folder that'll be inside the bag. If your precinct isn't open when you get there on election morning, you'll need to call us immediately so that we can get out there and contact somebody to get it open for you. The other thing in the bag will be your express vote cards. They look like this. These cards need to be inside of this bag and left in here until they're needed throughout the day. You don't want to leave these sit out. They have no ballot number or anything on them, and anyone could come over and run ballots through there. So please make sure you keep these safe. This box will contain all of your ballots for the day. When you get there on election morning, the box will have 2 locks already installed on it. Okay, when you get there, you're going to want to pop the lock and break the lock. They kind of twist and bend to break off and open the big door on the ballot box. Pull the ballots out. You're going to lock this back up with a new lock that was in your envelope. So these locks are already on there when you get it. These 2. You're going to break one off again, take your ballots out, and relock that side of the box. On this side of the box is a small slotted opening. Okay, so you'll break the lock off of this one as well, And this will be available for folks to put provisional ballots in. All your paperwork throughout the day, name change forms, anything like that is going to go in here. This does not get a second lock. So at this point, you should have one broken lock, one lock on the big door, two broken locks, and then you're going to have 4 locks remaining. If you break one of these locks in the morning, give us a call and we will bring you a new one. If you break it towards the end of the night, there's not a whole lot we can do about it at that point because you guys are packing up to come back to the office. So it would be kind of silly to run a lock out to somebody clear across the county. Just let us know that it happened on your problems and issue sheet. Double check all of your supplies before you get started in the morning and make sure it's the correct precinct. Make sure everything, we're going to use Ballville A as our example for this training. So make sure that your precinct sign says Ballville A, your ballots say Ballville A, your books say Ballville A. Make sure you don't have another precinct's materials on your table. This has happened once in one of the locations, and luckily there weren't any precinct-specific races on the ballot for that election. It was kind of a weird situation where the voting location manager got some help. Somebody was helping them unload, and the person that unloaded threw all of these materials on the opposite table. Gibsonburg B was voting on Gibsonburg A ballots. Gibsonburg A was voting on Gibsonburg B. I think you get the picture. Just make sure you check your materials before you get started and everything will run smoothly. Privacy dividers, they're the red, white, and blue little dividers that go up to give voters some privacy. Those will be at your location when you get there. Those will need to be set up on the tables. Again, remember, they'll have to be 6 feet apart from each other. Before opening the polls, everyone will need to take the oath. That will be administered by the voting location manager, and it's in the blue book. Everybody will take the oath and then sign the page before opening the polls. The 4-part list again will need to be hung at 6:30, 11, and 4. At the end of the night, we don't need this back, so if you want to throw it away, leave it on the door, that's fine too. It's all public information and there's nothing on there that can cause people any issues as far as identity theft or anything like that. Per Ohio law, your precinct needs to be up and running at 6:30 a.m. You have to open at 6:30 a.m. Not before, not after. If people are waiting to vote, a lot of times people are on their way to work in the morning at that time. They'll come in there and try to pressure you to make you hurry up. Where I think that might come in handy this year with the COVID, because they'll be stopped at the door. So the polls will not open prior to 6:30. Observers and journalists, section R. Observers will likely be in the polling locations for this election. To be permitted, they must file an observer appointment prior to the election with our office. We will provide you with the information for any observers assigned to your location. Journalists will be allowed to come into the polling location as long as they don't cause disruption and are not getting photos of any of the ballots. If they come in and they want to take a picture of the overall location, step back and away from voters, that's totally acceptable as long as they're not getting pictures of how people voted. And back to the observers, I think I forgot to say that the oath, observers will need to do an oath as soon as they come into your location. As I mentioned, we will let you know if you have them assigned for your location or the county. As soon as they enter, they need to take the oath before they can hang out and observe for the day. In the quick reference guide, there is a whole section in here for journalists and media if you need more information. Challenges. While challenging voters is an option under Ohio law, we highly recommend against doing it unless there's a way that you have first-hand knowledge and proof that a voter would fall into one of the categories below. In the past, we've had voters who were challenged simply because their English was broken. That is not a reason to challenge a voter. It has the potential to become a court issue, so please don't do it unless you have proof to corroborate those kind of accusations. The challenges that may be made are for only the following reasons. The voter is not a resident of the precinct. The voter is not a resident of the state of Ohio. They are not a U.S. citizen or not of legal voting age. Again, there's additional information in the flip chart quick reference guide that will be supplied on election day if you need to refer to any of this, or you can always call us and get some more guidance. Acceptable forms of identification. In the quick reference guide, there's a section that says voter ID requirements. Remember, you can accept an ID that has the voter's old address as long as it's the ID, as long as the poll book has their current information on it. Usually the expiration date has to be good on the ID as well. However, due to COVID, IDs expiring on or after March 9th, 2020 are acceptable forms of ID for this election. So keep that in mind. We cannot turn them away because their ID expired on or after March 9th. Everyone must show their ID when they come in to vote or they vote provisionally. No exceptions. If someone has a conceal and carry permit, that is also a acceptable form of ID. And we'll go through the rest of those that will work for identification purpose on election day. A photo ID. This can be a document issued by the United States government or the state of Ohio that includes all of the following information. However, we have to remember that the expiration date clause in this is not going to stand this year because of COVID. So March 9th and after, if they've expired within that time frame, they are acceptable. So you have to take them. There needs to be a photograph of the voter, the voter's name, which again should substantially conform to the poll book unless the poll book's been updated and the driver's license has not. The best way to kind of look at that is if someone moves and your birthday's not for maybe 6 more months when it's time to go renew your driver's license, you don't want to have to pay twice to do that. So an old address is acceptable on the ID as long as the book that you have for the voter has the most updated information. Military IDs, it doesn't matter what type of military ID, we accept those. Utility bills. Utility bills are acceptable as long as they have your current address and they're dated within the last year. Bank statements, that includes the same type of information. And that would be an acceptable form of ID. Any type of a government check or a paycheck, those are acceptable as well. And again, if you have questions about acceptable forms of ID, you can refer to the quick reference guide during the day, and you can always call our office for more information. Also remember, Ohio has changed the way it issues the driver's licenses, and now there's a temporary paper that people are issued that can be used. Green books. If you are manning the green book table, please be careful where you send the voters. And at this point, you don't need to ask for ID there. That's going to be done when the voter approaches the blue book. The green book table does not need to check identification at that point. So now we'll go through processing a regular voter with their photo ID. A voter approaches the table. You're going to ask the voter, what is your name and address? This is going to ensure that we have voters in the correct location. This is the signature poll book again. It's going to be precinct specific, and it's going to include all of the voters in that precinct that are eligible to vote. So you would find the voter's name on the poll book. This is also alphabetized. So if you need letter A, you can pull right to letter A. If you need B, it's right under letter B. So for our example, we're going to use James Ballman as our sample. So James is going to approach the table. He's going to tell you his name and his address. The person with the blue book is going to make sure that this is the correct address, and then have the voter sign here and check their ID at this point. Okay. The person with the clerk's book will be writing down. We're going to say James was our first voter to come through the door today. The clerk's book person will write down James Ballman's name. In column B is going to be his ballot number. That's going to be from the stub on the ballots at the table. So the ballot number will be entered here and his name will be written here. And then the person with the red book will give James his ballot and instruct him to vote. And when he's done voting, he needs to run it through the scanner on the way out the door. Okay, so we'll say James went on, he voted his ballot. When he goes out the door, he just needs to stick that right through the machine and it's going to tabulate it for him. Let's see here. The person who is doing the red book is going to have the ballots. They're going to give the ballot number to the person doing the blue book. That number is going to go all the way to the far right in the big box in here. So if it was ballot number 1 from the clerk's book, it's going to be ballot number 1 right here in the blue book. Okay, the express vote. That is this machine right here. The express vote machine can be used by anyone. You don't have to have a disability to use it, and it's inappropriate to ask people who want to use it if they have a disability. Anybody can use these. In a lot of counties, that is their main voting machine. That's how they do their voting. Sandusky County is kind of a hybrid county, if you will, where we have a paper ballot that we just stuck through the machine over there, or we have the express vote touch screen type of a voting system. This is an express vote card. These will be in your bag. Again, when they're not in use, they need to be kept inside the bag and secured. As you notice, there are no names, no pre-printed anything on these, no ballot numbers. So if a voter wants to use the express vote, you're going to give them one of these. Their ballot number is going to be recorded as EV for express vote. It's going to be recorded in the blue book and the red book with the same 2 letters. That's going to tell us that they voted one of these ballots. In order to help for the voter to use the express vote, it's going to take a bipartisan team to come over here and help the voter get started. Have the voter put the ballot card, the express vote card, right through the slot. And then it says precinct selection search. This contains, and as a matter of fact, the stick I'm using, the USB for this one, is going to have every precinct in the county on it. On election day, yours will be precinct or polling location specific. So you won't have to hunt and peck through so many different precincts to find the correct one that you're looking for. So what you'll do is you'll hit the search button, and that's where all of the precincts are going to come up for you. We need to get to Ballville A. Ballville A is the precinct we're using for training purposes because it contains a split. We're going to say in Ballville A that James was under the Clyde school, the Clyde school district. Okay. This book has three different sections three different sections. Some precincts have more splits than others. This one has the Clyde Green Springs School District, the Fremont School District, and the Old Fort School District, all within that one precinct. It's very important that people get the correct ballot. The book will tell you, not only by the tabs, but underneath of their name, it says what their school district is. Please be sure to double check that information before passing out the ballots or running them through the machine. So we've stuck our express vote card into the express vote machine, and I'm looking for Ballville Township A, Clyde. That's the first button right up here. We're going to press that, and it says confirm. Confirm that that's the ballot that you want. So I'm going to say activate because it is correct. So now all of the races will come up on here for the voter to choose from. I'm just going to run through, click a few of these. Just for informational purposes, we're not really voting. Nothing we're doing today is being tabulated. I'm just showing you how to use the equipment. And it's a rather long ballot on this one, looks like. After you're done voting, the voter, I guess I should say, because after you've started this up, both precinct election officials need to walk away and give the voter privacy so that they can vote. After the voter has made all of their selections, this summary screen is going to come up for them to make sure that everything that they voted on was marked properly on the ballot. So after verifying that everything has been marked properly, that's the way that they wanted to vote, they will just need to keep clicking the next button to get through the whole ballot. And again, this is something that the voter is going to do. It says now your selections will now be printed on the inserted card. If you are okay with these, you click the print card button. If you want to make changes, you'll need to hit the previous button and go back, and the voter can change what they wanted to change. But the voter will print the card when they're all done and they verify that the races they chose were what they wanted to do. This is going to print out a card that looks something like this. I don't know if all that's real visible on there, but this is all the races, how the voter chose the candidates and the issues, okay? Instruct the voter when this comes out of the express vote machine, they need to put it through the scanner like regular ballots on their way out the door. However, for this card, it goes right through the top. There's a smaller spot, and I'm not sure that the camera's going to pick that up, but there's a smaller spot at the top and the larger one on the bottom for regular ballots. So if you put that through there, their ballot is being scanned, tabulated, and then it's dropped into the bottom until the end of the night. When these cards, again, are not in use, keep them clipped and keep them in your bag so that they're not laying around for people to just come and pick up and anybody to get their hands on. Voters who are disabled and want to use the express vote does have a set of headphones that would be plugged in right here in the front, as well as a keypad that's attached on the side. This will toggle all of the switches and do all of the markings if the voter is using this. And it has Braille on it as well. But remember, folks don't need to be disabled in order to use that machine. Anybody can use it. Write-ins, we do have some write-ins this year again. Write-ins are typically someone who didn't file a petition on time, or maybe they had a problem with their petition and didn't have enough time to refile to get on the ballot. So they decided to run as a write-in. Every precinct will be provided with a list of the candidates whose names don't appear on the ballot, but are valid candidates to be on the ballot by form of a write-in list. That list has to be kept at your table, out of the view of voters. It cannot be offered to voters. It cannot be hung up. And if a voter asks you to see the list, you may show them the list of the write-ins, but it can't be taken away from the table. It's a good idea to remind the voter if they ask you about a write-in, that you remind them if they do cast a vote for any write-in candidates, the bubble needs to be filled in to the left, as well as the write-in name added to the line. Otherwise, the machine won't pick that up and the vote won't get counted. Provisional voters. Excuse me, this is always kind of a touchy subject for my coworkers. Nobody likes the provisional voter situation. It causes confusion for some of us. But some of the poll workers have been doing this for a number of years and they've got it down pat. This is a large election. Expect to have a larger number of provisional voters this time. Provisional people or voters are people who have moved, didn't update their address, or they've changed their name and they didn't update that with our office, or they don't have an ID. Maybe they ordered an absentee ballot. We've sent them a ballot. The book will reflect that. Those people need to be a provisional voter. What the provisional process does is that it's going to segregate that vote and that ballot until after the election is over, so that we can ensure that they didn't send an absentee in or vote in their old precinct, vote under their old last name. This is one of the steps that Ohio takes in order to ensure that only one ballot is counted. So it's an important step in the process. Again, it's going to be a very busy election, and there's probably a lot of people out there that didn't realize they need to have their information updated prior to the day before October 6th, when early voting starts. So all valid provisional ballots do get counted. Don't let the conspiracy theorists tell you that we shred the provisional ballots. That's not what we do. Those ballots, again, are just segregated until after the election, and they go through a process before they can be counted. If you have new election officials, please don't put them on a provisional table alone and put them out to the wolves. That discourages people to want to vote or to help again in the polling location, not to mention errors can happen very easily by putting someone in there who doesn't know what they're doing. If you have a new person and you want to show them how to do it, please stay with them through the process so that we don't make any big errors. Again, any of the following events that occur, the voter has to be sent to the provisional table. The voter's address has changed from what is in the signature poll book. The voter's name has changed from what's in the signature poll book. The voter has no ID, or they're marked as receiving an absentee ballot, or you just can't find them in the book. If a voter's address is different from what's in the signature poll book, the precinct election official will obtain the voter's name, their date of birth, and current address prior to calling the Board of Elections office. The Board of Elections needs to be called so that we can ensure that the new address has the proper precinct for the voter to go to in order to cast their ballot. We will provide the correct precinct, and we're going to tell you to fill out the authorization to vote slip. It's a little green slip, and I noticed that I don't have one in my bag. My apologies. But it's a little green slip and it says authorization to vote. So if you're on the provisional table, you call our office, please make sure you write down where you're sending the voter. Send that piece of paper with the voter so when they get to their next location, they know exactly where to go, and the officials at that location won't need to stop and call the Board of Elections again. Once that slip has been filled out, the office has been called, everything should be good. Go ahead and send them to the provisional table and get the process started. If the precinct is within your polling location and it's just a different table, send the voter over to the correct table or to the provisional table so that they can be given the correct ballot. And if time allows, kind of walk them over to that table to show them where to go so that folks aren't wandering around the precinct lost and not knowing where they're supposed to vote. A voter who is provisional is going to fill out a yellow envelope. This is going to be at the provisional table. This is our provisional folder. And it's going to contain, oh, there's our authorization to vote slips I was looking for. Okay, that's the little green slip that you're going to send if you need to send someone to a different location. Inside here is a notice of change of name. Registration cards are in here. Another set of forms that we'll talk about quickly here, and a provisional ballot notice, as well as these envelopes. The provisional envelopes are different. There's two different sets of these envelopes. One is strictly a voter with no ID. It's in bright red right at the top, voters without ID. Those are the only ones that should be using these envelopes. Any other provisional voter will use a regular provisional envelope with no sticker up here about the ID. It's just going to have your precinct. All of these contain a precinct, but this one is strictly for those who have no ID. The voter's going to be asked to go fill this envelope out at a table. After that's done, they're going to return to the table to get their ballot. Inside the provisional folder is a template. This template can be thrown over top of the envelope quickly to make sure that the voter didn't miss any of the fields that need to be completed. This is going to help the ballot get counted. Okay, so it's important that we use these templates, throw it over top of that envelope real quick, and make sure that they didn't miss anything. After the voter fills this out, brings it back, you've made sure it's all good, they're going to sign on the provisional page in the blue book. Okay, there's going to be a tab in here that says provisional voters. That's the only place that the provisional voters will be signing is on the provisional page. You'll give the voter their ballot and instruct them that when they're done voting, they need to fold their ballot up, return it to the envelope that they filled out, seal it, and bring it back to the table. Okay? When they bring it to the table, it's going to go in this slot. Now, some precincts don't like this slot sitting on the outside of the table to where voters can gain access. They prefer it to be to the back. It's entirely up to you. It's been said sometimes voters will just stick ballots through here, thinking that they were supposed to return it here. Make sure from the beginning you give voters clear, concise instructions. Regular ballots need to go through the DS200 machine on the way out the door. Yellow envelopes need to be put into this box. When they're done voting, you need to provide the voter with a provisional hotline notice. These are also in the provisional folder, and this is available for voters to check after the election to make sure that their ballot got counted. It provides instructions if they need to provide additional identification. All their instructions are on here for that. If a voter's name is different in the signature poll book, but the address is the same, those voters will need to fill out a Form 10L. This is if they haven't updated their information. They can only do this form and not be a provisional voter if they have a name change only. It's the same address. They have legal documentation, such as a marriage license, any kind of a probate document, etc. Those documents are needed in order to fill this out and avoid the yellow envelope situation. Okay, so these forms are available in that blue folder. They'll fill that form out. Just make sure when they bring that form back up to your table that the precinct election official verifies the information and signs the bottom portion. The voter will get a regular ballot. They'll sign their new name in the blue book, and their ballot will go through the machine. The form, the completed form, will go into the box. Okay, this box is going to be locked up for the day, so nobody can gain access to take anything out. You can only put things through it during the day. If the voter has changed their name and they don't have any legal documentation with them, they cannot do a regular ballot. With the 10L form, they'll need to be a provisional voter, fill this out, and get a provisional ballot. A voter comes in and they forgot their identification. They have an option if they want to leave and go home and get their ID, they can do so. If they don't want to do that, they can be a provisional voter. Again, it has to be in the envelope that says no ID. That's the only way the board office can distinguish later if we are waiting for someone to show an ID. Otherwise, we'll have these sitting there and won't know. We'll be expecting, if you put it in this envelope without the ID, we won't know that we're waiting on someone to show us later after the election. They have, I think it's 7 days after the election to provide proper ID so that we can count their ballot immediately. If we don't know we're expecting that, we can't get it. Please make sure that they go into the correct envelopes. If they have no ID, they're going to fill that out. Again, it's the same process. They'll bring the envelope back. The template goes over top to make sure everything's been completed and filled out. And then they'll be instructed to put their voted ballot inside of that yellow envelope and return it to the slot in the box. If in your poll book it says that the voter was already given an absentee ballot, they need to be provisional. This is going to stop us from counting both an absentee ballot for that voter as well as an election day ballot for that voter. This is going to be the stop process that doesn't allow that to happen. The voter's going to complete the yellow envelope. They're going to bring it back up. You guys are going to throw the template on it, check and make sure that all the information's there, and then the voter will put their voted ballot through the box. We have put, to kind of summarize things and make it easier for people working at the provisional table, there's a little cheat sheet that's in the back, and it gives you all the examples. If a voter's address is different, if their name is different, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it'll give you step by step on how to handle that process. All absentee ballots have to be turned in to the Board of Elections. They cannot be brought to the polling locations on election day. as a little side note there. One more thing I want to say about the provisionals. If you see folks running around with yellow envelopes in their hands, do not let them folks go near the scanner. We can't allow these ballots that are supposed to be secluded to be run through the DS-200. Okay, so it's important when you see people with a yellow envelope that they bring that ballot back in the yellow envelope and put it in the box. If you have a voter that you can't find in the poll book, it's probably one of those situations where they moved, they're registered in a different county perhaps, but they didn't update their information with our board. If you can't find them in the book, call the Board of Elections. We can tell you where that person needs to vote so that they go to the right precinct and their ballot can get counted. The yellow envelopes, those people are always going to sign again on the provisional section in the blue book, not on the regular page. They have to go in the provisional section of the book, and they always go through the box. Things to remember: no voter is ever told that they can't vote. If there are questions concerning a voter's eligibility, the provisional ballot verification process through our office will answer the key questions to make sure that the ballot can get counted or not counted in some situations. If they weren't registered to vote somewhere in the state of Ohio, obviously that ballot can't be counted. But we do everything that we can to make sure that they are counted. Don't assume that you know where a voter's supposed to go. You're required to call us to obtain the correct precinct information. Let's make sure we get these folks to their correct precincts so that every ballot that can be counted will be counted. Any voter with a yellow envelope, and I know it sounds redundant, sign it on the provisional page. The yellow envelope has to go through the slot. Please take your time and call us with any questions you have regarding provisionals. That's what we're here for, and we want to help you do it properly. If you have a voter under Section Y, sometimes a voter will show up and it's the wrong precinct, but they insist that they vote in that precinct right now. They're on their way to work, they don't have time, whatever the case may be. For those voters who insist on voting in the wrong precinct, these little papers are inside of the provisional envelope, and it says on the front, use only when the voter refuses to go to their correct precinct. The voter must vote a provisional ballot, fill out in full the form inside. The precinct election officials will fill the form out. The voter will vote a yellow provisional ballot and attach this form to the ballot when they bring it back up. This is just a verification process that you folks told these people you're in the wrong location, you're in the wrong precinct. We want to make sure you go to the right precinct. If they refuse, you need to fill one of these out. The voter has to be provisional. Spoiled ballots under Section Z. Voters will make errors on their ballots at times. Everybody is entitled to get up to 3 ballots, okay? But there's a process in order to make sure that all of these ballots don't go through the machine. If a voter spoils a ballot and they bring it up to the table, you have to have them fold it up, put it into this envelope that says spoiled ballots. It'll have your precinct information up in the corner. Have the voter put it in here, seal it up, put it through the slot. Only then can you issue the voter a second ballot. In the blue book, to write down a second ballot number that's been issued, it needs to go on the top part of the smaller 2 boxes in here. So ballot number 1, we'll say, was over here in the wide column. Ballot number 2 needs to go on the top small box. And if it happens for a third time, that number would go below here. You may want to tell the voter if they come up for a second one, they only get 3 shots. For the clerk's book, the first ballot number that you issued was in column B. If there's a spoiled ballot and they're issuing a second ballot, it goes in column C, and so on. If they do a third one, it's going to go into column D. So make sure you guys get their ballots before giving them a new ballot. Disabled voters, in general, please watch out for any cords that might be on the ground, any other tripping locations in your tripping hazards in your location, or anything else that could cause a problem for voters when they're walking through. Make sure the paths are wide enough for wheelchairs or walkers. If you see somebody who appears to need assistance, please offer your assistance before grabbing for a wheelchair, a cane, a walker. Folks don't like that. So please make sure you ask before you invade personal space, especially with COVID. Don't get too close to the people. Sometimes people may need assistance with their ballots when they come out to vote. They may bring another person with them, a family member, or they may ask election officials to help. If they do ask for help from the polling location or the precinct election officials, excuse me, you can assist with their ballot, but it must be 2 people. No 2 from the same political party. So it can be a Democrat and a Republican. It can be a Republican and a nonpartisan. You get the picture. No 2 Democrats, no 2 Republicans. Nobody can help people vote under those circumstances. We have to split that up to do it in a bipartisan way. So those 2 people will help the voter. One person can read the ballot if the voter insists on that kind of a help. One person can read it, the other person will mark the ballot. You can only read what is printed on the ballot. You cannot give your opinion. You cannot provide a Cliff Notes version or a summary of an issue or a candidate, or educate the voter on the issue or the candidate. It's whatever the voter says is what you mark. You can't answer the questions. Once the voter has marked the ballot, or you've marked the ballot for them, in this case, you'll have privacy sleeves. It's just basically this folder that you can walk around with the ballot inside of here, and it is going to keep the secrecy for the voter. Nobody's going to see how anyone voted if you use this when you carry it around to help them get it through the machine. Don't discuss how a voter voted or make comments about why they needed help. Just help the voter, help them vote, put it through the machine, and get them on their way. As we mentioned a little bit before, we can't refuse anyone a right to cast a ballot in the election, with or unfortunately without a mask. Part of the solution is to have curbside voting available. I know we do this on a regular basis. Every year it has to be available, but this year I would say that we should expect an increase in people who want to vote from their car. This is done again in a bipartisan way. 2 people will need to go out to the vehicle, check the ID, have the voter sign in the blue book. That's right, you're going to have to come in. You're going to have to take the books back out with you. At least this book, I should say. Once the voter has signed their name in the blue book, you can bring this back in. Give the voter a ballot. 2 of you will need to take the ballot out to them. And then when they're done voting, 2 of you need to get the ballot to bring it back in. If the voter has someone else in the vehicle that will bring it in for them, that's acceptable as well. After you've helped them, I think we already talked about that part. Let's see. If you have to pull the blue book and take it out to a vehicle, people have touched the pens, they've touched the books, wipe everything down before bringing it back up to the table, to the main table where people are voting. I know a lot of this sounds maybe overwhelming. We are still looking into maybe having some extra people out at each location just to do the curbside part. Unfortunately, it's still going to cause an interruption here with the blue book. However, there's only going to be a certain amount of people allowed in the building at one time, so nobody should feel overwhelmed at all that day, on that day. You're not going to have normal lines of people standing there giving you the evil eye, trying to get you to hurry up and rush. You won't feel as pressured, okay? So just take your time and process everybody the proper way. Back to the express vote, again, this is ADA acceptable. If someone with a disability needs to use this machine, that's what it's here for, with the keypad, the headphones, etc. You can still help the voter get started on that, but the machine is here. Okay, at this point in the program, you may want to grab a pen and a paper and write down this next little tidbit if you want to get paid for attending the training. You're going to have to email the following phrase to sandusky@ohiosos.gov. Again, sandusky@ohiosos for Secretary of State.gov. The phrase is going to be, what a year to be a precinct election official. Aren't you glad you signed up? Okay, once we get towards the end here, under section BB, at the end of the night, you're almost done. You're getting ready to pack everything up and call it a day. It's been a long day. Everyone's anxious to get out, but you can't close until 7:30. The things that have been posted, the flags, the signs, the resolutions, can't come off the walls until 7:30. But once that magic 7:30 time comes, you will have one more lock over here on this box that you need to break off. Okay? So you're going to break that lock off. You're going to remove all of this stuff that's been put in here through the day, your provisional envelopes, change of names, your spoiled envelopes. All of that needs to come out of this box. Sort all of those things out. And all of your additional ballots that are left over from the end of the day that you're not using, those need to go back in here. And you need to put 2 locks, new locks, on this to make sure it's secured for coming back to the Board of Elections. Okay, so at that point, you should have no locks left. Again, if you break a lock at the end of the night on one of these, just write it down on your problems and issue sheet. Give us a heads up. If you break them in the morning, we will bring you new ones because they're all coded, okay? When you get to the end of the night, you're going to need to record the number of the ballots that you used. Okay, you'll have an accounting sheet, and it will have you record the last ballot number from the clerk's book. That's the red book. Onto the number of signatures line of the accounting sheet. If done correctly and you had no spoiled ballots, that number should be where the last name was written in by the clerk. Record the number of any express vote cards that you had on that line, and then subtract from the number of signatures. Record the total on the line with the equal sign next to it. Count the number of spoiled envelopes from the ballot box and record the number of spoiled ballots on the line of the accounting sheet. Add the number with the equal and the plus spoiled and record that total on the line that says total ballots used. Count the number of provisional envelopes from the blue ballot box that you pulled out of here a little bit ago record that on the provisional line of the accounting sheet, and that number is going to kind of stand alone, so that won't involve any calculations on the sheet. If you have a split in your precinct, you'll need to repeat that step for each precinct. For example, again, we use Ballville A. We have the Clyde School District in Ballville A. We have Fremont, and we have Old Fort. So make sure if you have 3 different ballot styles, you do that process for each ballot style. After the accounting sheet is done and everything's packed up and ready to go, the voting location manager and the precinct election officials need to sign that accounting sheet, and the voting location manager will record the date and the time. Everything that gets packed up, all of your provisionals, your voter registration cards, spoiled ballots, and all the other completed forms that came out of your blue box, those all need to go back into the canvas pouch to be returned at the end of the night. All ballots used, unused, and the express vote cards get put into the blue ballot box at the end of the night. Be sure you've gotten your express vote cards off the table and that you don't have any stray ones laying around. Once you're sure that you have everything in its place and where you want it, you're going to take one lock, zip this bag up, and then lock the bag. The other 2 remaining locks are going to go right here on to your blue, onto the blue ballot box. Be certain that all of your, if you're a voting location manager, make sure that your attendance roster, accounting sheet, and checklists are completed and signed prior to coming back to the board office. All 3 documents can be returned in the envelope that they come out of. We're going to give the voting location managers one little envelope. Everything can get put back in there for ease when they drop off on election night. And you won't have papers floating around everywhere. Be sure that all the other forms, the oaths, are completed. Record the date and the total number of signatures. The clerk's book and the blue book both will have oath pages in those that will need to be filled out. Administrators will need to sign and have each voting location manager sign the tape that's going to come out of the scanner at the end of the night. Voting location managers, again, must be accompanied back to the board office by a member of the opposite party. If you have 2 precinct election or 2 voting location managers in a polling location and they are opposite party, they can ride back together and you won't have to bring a precinct election official along. As long as you have 2 members of opposite parties returning the equipment, that's what's most important. You will have to come back in 1 vehicle. Masks must be worn and socially distanced to the best of your ability within the vehicle. Once you get back, follow the traffic flow that the sheriff's department will supervise to get everybody through there in an orderly and timely manner. At this point, we're going to wrap up the 2020 general election precinct election official training. Thank you again so much for signing up, and have a great election day.